All right, well, welcome. I will get us started here. Hopefully your Friday has gone well for you. To start off this class period, though, our test coordinator would like for us to share with our classes, especially junior classes, about next Tuesday. So next Tuesday, we are going to have ACT here. And so this is going to be the test for real. It's not a practice. You're actually going to be doing it. And so just a few things, logistical things, you should have received from the test coordinator through your apps account an email about where you are going to be testing, which room you'll be taking the ACT. Also, know that the buses will run as usual. So if you're worried about transportation to school, buses will be there. Show up the day with pencils and a calculator for the math part of the exam. And if you have not, take some time here, perhaps over the weekend or Monday, to get on myact.org and set up your account. If you have not already done that, if you have set up an account, remember you can select up to 4 colleges to receive your scores, and then after the exam, if there are more colleges that you want to receive your scores, there might be a fee to go along with that, and that can vary. So you might want to take a look at that. If you're wondering about how you get on myact.org, you can just Google that, or you can simply also, there should be a link on your class of 2022 page. Okay, so is there any questions about the ACT? Feel free to unmute or put into the chat if you have questions.
If we don't have a calculator, will one be provided?
Well, that all depends on who your teacher is. I mean, if it's a math teacher, they're probably going to have them, but typically they may not have calculators. So you do want to make sure you have a calculator. So maybe show up a little bit early and check in with a math teacher to see if they do have extra calculators.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions? It is important to have a calculator. I think it would be hard to do the math part without one. So see if you can try to find one between now and Tuesday. All right. If there are no other questions with ACT, we'll just move forward here. So you have been in the past couple days looking at origins, tactics, and organizations related to the civil rights movement. And rest assured, again, you can turn in that assignment on Monday, first thing, when you come into the classroom. Just turn that in, or submit that also electronically. And I'll look at it, the grade book, throughout the weekend to see if there's been any submissions that way as well, and update. But looking back at the OTO, if we look at like the origins of it, if we have any like big takeaways from the origins, what are people looking for when we look at the origins? What are the big burning issues here related to the origins of the civil rights movements? Can anyone share with me quickly, either in the chat or unmute, what you think are the big issues that are going to contribute to the civil rights movement? Okay, lynching. Yes, lynching is going to be a big one. And, again, there are laws on the books about murdering someone. However, it seems like it's not being applied equally, and there are examples where justice isn't going to be had here, that someone commits or engages in lynching, and the courts will simply nullify, or at least the juries will nullify the evidence, and no one's held accountable. Jim Crow laws, absolutely. And segregation. All right, so these are definitely some big ones, and ultimately, that's going to lead to what we'll call the civil rights movement, and it's going to take, as we find, it's going to take time to take on some of these issues here. Now, to do that, you also came across a variety of tactics. So if we could quickly kind of recap, what are these tactics that is going to be used? Again, feel free to unmute or put into the chat. So how are we going to know about these issues, basically? And that's where we have to look at perhaps tactics, or how are we going to take on these issues? Yes, newspapers, exactly, newspapers. The medium in which we're having you complete this assignment, through newspapers. The power of the pen and getting the story out. That's big. Mainstream newspapers aren't getting the message out, so Black newspapers are going to be very, very instrumental here. Also, when a platform is presented to them, in the case of like Frederick Douglass in the World's Fair speech, if he's giving that big stage, he reluctantly had took it, but once he was able to get that that platform of the speech, he let the world know what is the issue. Okay, so taking advantage of the platform, there's a variety of platforms, speeches, newspapers, even through creating one's own self-help institutions. The HBCUs are going to be an example of that, and just the creation of these organizations is going to be very, very powerful here as well. And then we look at again, the organization pieces. But if we look at these organizations, what can we say about the voices of these organizations? Is there anything that we can say about these, the voices of these organizations, or the methods of these organizations? Feel free to unmute or put into the chat here. Because when you look at these organizations and leaders, you have, Charles Hamilton Houston, you have Marcus Garvey, you have Du Bois, you have Booker T. Washington, A. Philip Randolph. I think it'd be very interesting to have all those individuals in the same room. What kind of conversation they have? Do all these individuals agree that civil rights is a pressing issue? Okay, I see a no. Who in that list doesn't think civil rights is a pressing issue? Okay, Booker T. Washington could be that. And I think when we emphasize with Booker T. Washington, he wants to focus a lot on vocational education or economics independence, and we don't think that Washington is interested in the social and the political pieces. And I think he is, but it's in some cases it's secondary to the economics, And he is trying to, I suppose, be in that middle, that bridge between the different types of communities. And so he does get scrutinized for that. All right, so the four others might agree that civil rights is big, but how do they differ? How might they differ? And feel free to put in the chat or unmute. How might these individuals differ about civil rights? And I know we've talked about this before in class and in other units, but ultimately, where do they differ? When we look at Du Bois and Garvey, Randolph, Houston, it can be all about their methods on how to achieve civil rights and what is the most pressing elements of civil rights. So that's important to acknowledge. But when we look at this is tactics like peace or violence. Absolutely. All that stuff plays a part here. And it depends, if it's peaceful, is that going to be strong enough to get change? Is it violent? Is that too strong of a tactic here? Is it going to turn some people off here? I think that those are good points being brought up as well when we approach civil rights. And you see that play out too after 1945 when you look at the different organizations and they differ. Perhaps maybe going along with the peaceful protests that is championed by Martin Luther King Jr. is going to work a little bit by the mid 1960s, some are going to get frustrated perhaps with that method, and they're going to take it to different levels, bring in a little bit more militancy of it. And does that help or hurt the cause? That's playing out as well at this time period, especially when you look at Marcus Garvey and his idea of Black nationalism is definitely something that Du Bois finds concerning as well. So if we look at up to 1945, you should be getting a sense of the historical context that leads to what we call the modern civil rights movement. But what we can see here is that perhaps there are some things lacking to prevent it from really being far-reaching. And we're going to start addressing that. And what I'm getting at is you need to have more involvement of government in this as well. And we're not necessarily referring to just as local and state, but we're talking about federal government as well. Having the ability to weigh in on the civil rights issues and make some credible changes. Up to 1945, there are some measures happening, but not enough. And it might be one branch working on creating change, but it's not in coordination with the other branches, if that makes sense here. When we look at this idea of creating a more equitable society or a more equal society here, we have to look at the court system. All right, and that's what we're gonna take a look at with this activity, U.S. Supreme Court legal challenges here. We may have remembered from the Civil Rights Reconstruction Unit a very important Supreme Court case Plessy versus Ferguson? Okay, can someone put into the chat or unmute, why is Plessy versus Ferguson a very important landmark Supreme Court decision? Feel free to unmute or put into the chat. Why Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896, is an important landmark Supreme Court decision. What principle does it establish? Now, I know someone at home could probably, there we go, separate but equal, separate but equal. That's huge. And what it's saying is state governments, the Supreme Court says that state governments can create separate but equal facilities, or they can create these laws that are separation laws, that it doesn't violate the 14th Amendment. And you can see on the screen there's a picture of Homer Plessy. Some would say, you know, he is he is a Creole. He is of mixed races, but he, in all practical purposes, if you didn't know that he was African American, he would pass off as someone who is white. But he became that test case in the Plessy versus Ferguson, where he was challenging the separation laws about rail cars. And it made itself all the way up to the Supreme Court. And I think they thought that the Supreme Court was going to strike down the racial separation laws. And in reality, they didn't. And they, in some ways, gave ultimately the blessing to them. And so that sets up the separate but equal idea. And ultimately, that's going to be challenged. It will be challenged periodically, but it's not until the historic Brown versus Board of Education that's going to strike it down. All right. So Homer Plessy, Plessy versus Ferguson, that's going to be the critical piece here when we look at taking on civil rights and trying to find ways to bring it down. In this case, the court. Yesterday in class, I showed the video about Charles Hamilton Houston and how his strategy was using the courts. And that is going to be one of the methods, and it's going to be the method by the NAACP, definitely, to go that route. And they will have some success. And so we want to take a look at some of the successes that will occur as a result of going through the courts. So let's open up, and I did open up into Schoology this assignment here, and it is called the U.S. Supreme Court Legal Challenges. All right, so there are two things that are attached to this assignment. This assignment is what you should work on today, and even though I know that some of you have the OTO to still finish, this is, like I've said before, you know, we've got deadlines, and then most likely we're going to be introducing some new stuff as well. So we want to take a look at the U.S. Supreme Court legal challenges. So you have a matrix, and then we have put together some handouts, and you should just focus on the handouts here. You shouldn't have to really GTS unless you want, for your own sake, more understanding here. But when we look at these cases, what we're trying to do is show the impact that it's going to have on education. Education is going to be the key here, one of the key issues in the civil rights movement. Voting rights is going to be very important as well. Attempts to deal with lynching is also going to be important, but education is there. And you know, we can theorize this for a very long time about the importance of education. Something that I've talked to, I remember as a student working on getting my teaching credentials, we talked about the meaning and the importance of education and how education can level the playing field and how education brings people from different backgrounds together. And we have something that is in common with each other and the empowerment that comes with education. So with Plessy versus Ferguson, it's going to allow for separate facilities. And some of you in the OTO focus on the historically Black colleges and universities. In some ways is a result of these racial separation laws as well. Education is key. So there are 11 Supreme Court cases here. All right, first one would be Plessy versus Ferguson, and that's not one that you're going to put on here. You're going to select 5 of them, but you do need to read the Plessy versus Ferguson. We talked a little bit about this already, but you do want to look at the Plessy versus Ferguson to get, again, that historical context as well. So you can understand perhaps how some of these other cases play out. So you pick 5 of them of the 11. So I would probably go through and just do, after I read Plessy versus Ferguson, I just do a quick skim of the next of the other 10 that are here, 10 or 11, and then pick 5 of them. Give a little summary of it, 2, 3 nice bullet points with it. And what was the decision by the U.S. Supreme Court? You know, and the ruling is important. And how many justices are in favor or against? That's all important, because that tells you how, to what degree or how far the courts are behind this change. And then what is the impact does it have on education? How is it changing education? Okay, so we're looking at those little pieces there. All right, and no activity of ours would be complete without, of course, the BHQs, the big historical questions, because we want to get you to think here. First one is, which of the cases listed above had the biggest impact, positive or negative, on civil rights in education, and why? And also evaluate the impact of the U.S. Supreme Court on the civil rights movement in the U.S. Think of how do decisions about education impact the bigger picture. Okay, this is where we get to philosophize a little bit here. Okay, so you're only focusing on 5. All right. So with that, do we have any questions or anything that needs to get clarified with this? We understand the expectations. Perhaps maybe someone put into the chat a yes or a no so I can get some indication. All right, so I see a yes there. All right, so realistically, this shouldn't take you that long, but it should give you an idea of the role of the Supreme Court in changing education, and by doing that, they are taking on the issues of civil rights and some of those racial separation laws. All right. Next week, we will take a look a little bit more at how segregation is going to end, and then also the role of not only the U.S. Supreme Court, but also the other branches in this process and some grassroots organizations as well. All right, so recap here. If you have not completed the OTO, you want to make sure that you do. And then again, if you are in class, you bring that to school on Monday. If you're VLA, just take some pictures and please upload that, and I'll get to that. But then also you want to make sure by Monday, even though, again, the deadline says for today with this, the legal challenges matrix, ultimately, I'm going to say by Monday, walking into my class, virtually or real, you want these 2 activities done, the OTO and the legal challenges. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. I won't keep you much longer if you don't have any questions. Hopefully, you have a wonderful weekend. I think the weather's going to get better. And so hopefully you have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you on Monday.